I do understand that if you are in contact with what's going on in this election at all on any level, then you're going, oh my gosh, everybody's lost their minds and this is kind of crazy.
On to our next question now from Henry in Greenbrier. I know in theory the election shouldn't have a major overall impact on my money, but I'm still concerned. I'm 49 and heavily invested in equities. I'm wondering if I should start to diversify before things get too dicey. Two-part question there from Henry. We'll get to the investment part in a moment, but first, let's get to why you're concerned. I know people are.
Right.
We hear it in the client meeting room. That is probably one of the biggest questions that we get. How is the election going to impact the economy and the stock market? But why are you concerned? Do you have some ideology driving these concerns? Are you worried that your candidate is not going to win? Because I think that's probably part of it. If the one I don't want in there gets in there, the world's going to hell in a handbasket, right? That's kind of the common belief. But is it true? I got a graphic here I want to show you. And we used this in the fastest 4 minutes in finance just a couple of weeks ago. So if you get that, you may recognize this chart. And if you don't, I'll tell you how in just a minute to get the fastest 4 minutes in finance delivered to your email inbox. But this is a graphic, if you're watching on our video version of the show, that is, as you see the title, Consumer Confidence Based on Political Affiliation. And what this is, the red line, appropriately enough, is represents Republicans or people who identify as Republicans or at least lean Republican. And the blue line is people who recognize as a Democrat or that leans Democrat. Now, that line on that graph is the percentage of those people who believe the economy was good during the last four presidents, right? So you see they're going back to 2000, that when President Bush was in office, a Republican, the Republicans were pretty confident the economy was going well, and Democrats said, no, it's lousy. And then we get a change in office, and we get a Democrat. President Obama comes in. Look at the line. Big surprise, right? Now, the Democrats think that the economy's great. The Republicans don't think it's great. Donald Trump gets in office, and man, Republicans are feeling really good about the economy, and the Democrats are not. And you see the dip that both of them take there was COVID. And then into the President Biden's term, it flip-flops again. So, no real surprise here, right? That if you are Republican, you think that when your person is in office, the economy's rolling and vice versa. But the reality here is, Janet, and the big takeaway here that's not on that chart, we had GDP growth in all four of those presidential terms, and we had stock market growth in three of the four. The only one that didn't was during the Bush administration. And granted, we had a lot more going on there with 9/11 and the financial crisis.
So I've been sitting in the chair as a financial advisor for over 2 decades, and so we've seen, a few presidents come and go during that time.
Yep.
And I will say I do understand that if you are in contact with what's going on in this election at all on any level, then you're going, oh my gosh, everybody's lost their minds and this is kind of crazy. I get it. And to a degree, you're accurate. We haven't seen anything quite like this before. But what we have seen every single time is the markets leading up to the election, they're pretty crazy because the market, here's the deal, the market wants an answer. It wants to know who it's going to dance with for the next 4 years. So I say this as I know it sounds crazy as a point of encouragement, but it really is, that it has been crazy before every election. It's not relative to the two people who are at the helm of the Democrat or Republican Party respectively. It's not relative to them. It is relative to the unknown about who will be sitting in the president's seat for the next 4 years. But once the market gets an answer, what we inevitably see is an upturn. And Scott, frankly, it hasn't been a bad place, anyway, leading up to this election.
Right, that's for sure. And I think that it is important to mention that true policy change does matter, right?
Yeah.
If the person who wins the presidency takes a route that is detrimental to corporations, it may matter at least a little bit. But overall, anyone who has bet long-term against the U.S. stock market and the U.S. economy has lost. And that goes to the investment part of Henry's question, because we believe equities are long-term investments. So when he asks us, I'm heavily invested in equities and I'm 49 years old, The question I would ask back to Henry is, when do you plan to use those investments? When do you plan to take income from those investments? And the likely answer is going to be when I retire, right? Because I'm going to consider myself taking only employment income until such time as I don't have employment, right? So then when your retirement income starts, and let's say it's 65 for Henry, then think about how long-term that window still is. You're still 16 years away from needing to sell any of your equity investments. So we would consider you to be strongly in the accumulation phase or growth phase of your investments, right? So what happens, Janet, in the next couple of weeks before the election doesn't really matter when we're talking about 16 years.
You're right. And we have a graphic to show us on this as well, because what we're talking about here is over the span from age 49 until the time that you retire, how many days do you want to be out of the market? And what happens if you go, you know what, just for a little while, I'm going to slide over and put my money in cash, and then I'll get back in after it's okay. This shows the impact of missing the best days in the market. And the challenge is you don't know when those are going to be. And so we want to focus way more on time in the market, not timing the market. So if you're 49, I would stay put I'm not saying in your specific allocation, but stay put in the market. So if we look at this average annualized return, this is on the S&P, so 30-year average annualized return, we get to an 8%, okay? But if you missed the best 10 days, you've got basically 5.25%. Okay,
that's
so
wild.
Yeah, from 8% to 5.25% as an average annual, and that difference of 2.75% adds up over 30 years. I'm telling you, it's a game changer. And then if you missed the best 20 days, y'all, this is in 30 years of time. If you miss the best 20 days, that 8% drops down to 3.4%. If you missed the best 30 days, then it drops down to 1.8. You missed the best 40, it's 0.4. And Scott, we go in the negative on the average 30-year annualized return in the S&P if you missed the 50 best days in a 30-year time span. It's less than 2 months.
Yep.
Of exposure to the market.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I had a client one time, I talked about this, showed him that chart, and he said, yeah, but wonder what the returns would be if I missed the 50 worst days in the market. I'm like, well, they would be a whole lot better, but when are those going to be?
Yeah, you can't time it.
You can't time it.
Yeah.
And the reality is that many of those best days occur during a bear market, when times are bad.
That's exactly right.
But it takes a big uptick, and nobody would really, at least sentiment-wise, think that was going to be the case. So very important to stay invested. Now, I will say on the equity piece to that question, when he says, I'm heavily invested in equities, I would want to look at what types of equities. Are you talking about individual equities? What does your overall portfolio look like just in the equity asset class? Because diversification can still matter here in terms of what types of equity exposure you have. And certainly, on balance, other asset classes can be a part of that portfolio. So I think the general answer to the question here is to stay invested. Don't let the election cause you to do the wrong thing at the wrong time for the wrong reason. But an overall assessment of your portfolio, where are you on track for your retirement goals, is certainly something that I would recommend as well. This is the question of the week, so congrats to Henry. We thank you for reaching out with that question, and we will send you a free Get Ready for the Future Show tumbler for being the question of the week. Here's what we want you to do. We want you to email us, Henry, to claim it. Just send it to show@getreadyforthefuture.com. And if you'd like to be like Henry and win a free tumbler, or that you just have a question that's burning on your mind, you heard something that we just talked about, say, yeah, but what about this? Send it in to us. If you have a question, you can do it in one of a couple of ways. We've got a number, 501-381-5228, that you can call and leave a voicemail, or you can just send us a text. I know some people are shy about having their voice on the radio. If they don't want their voice on the air, you can just send us a text. That's what most people do. Or you can send us an email. Just send it to show@getreadyforthefuture.com, and then look for your question next week on the Get Ready for the Future show.